According to a new CBS News poll out today, a majority of Americans are opposed to the Republican tax plan amid concerns over how it will affect the middle class.
The poll found that 53% of Americans disapprove of the proposal, while just 35% say they support it. For a closer look at these numbers, let's bring in CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. Good to see you.
How are you, Vlad?
Good, good. So, based on your polling, what groups do Americans believe will benefit most from this tax bill?
Well, you know, we always say partisans don't agree on everything, right? Well, we found something partisans agree on. They all think that corporations will benefit, and they all think that the wealthy will benefit. Now, that's not necessarily, in the eyes of some, a bad thing. And we'll talk about that. But really, you do see this big gap between people who think corporations and the wealthy will benefit and that they themselves will not necessarily, and that the middle class will not necessarily benefit, at least in terms of direct tax cuts.
And that didn't matter if they were Republicans or Democrats. They didn't think they would personally benefit from the tax plan.
Right. Even Republicans did not all think that they were personally going to get a tax cut, and yet they still support the plan for other reasons.
So you mentioned that everyone across the board accepts the fact that corporations will benefit. But the whole argument with this is that there's a trickle down, right? That if corporations are able to have more money, they'll then create more jobs. How did your poll numbers sort of shake that out? What do people think?
Right. Well, for Republicans, they are saying that the cuts for the wealthy and corporations will lead to a better economy, will lead to corporations using the money to create jobs. And they're very distinct from Democrats and independents in that regard, because Democrats and independents do not buy that at all. They would much rather have the tax cut go directly to them. So Republicans do believe in that theory. And they also then, when they think that, they think, well, it'll give the economy a boost. So overall, so you might call that an indirect benefit, but that's why they come at this and say, even if I'm not getting something myself, and I don't think I am, that it'll help the overall economic environment.
Right.
Regardless of which group feels they are getting the benefit from this tax bill, do Americans feel that this bill is fair?
Yeah, most of them say no. Most of them say no. But the difference is that where Republicans overwhelmingly believe it is fair, what we see is this difference in how you think the economy works. And it's just a fundamental difference in whether you think that the money should go directly to people, or whether you think that the wealthy have earned it and therefore ought to be able to keep it, whether corporations are the engines that create jobs. And Republicans, by and large, believe that. And so they're saying, okay, it is fair because it gives more breaks, and they think it gives more breaks to those folks. And Democrats, of course, very dramatically disagree. Most independents also disagree. I do think, though, that there's still a core of Republicans, it's about a third in here, who still look like they're a little bit skeptical of all that. Everything I've been talking about is sort of by and large the majority. And it's that third that I wonder if over time, if they don't see benefits, if they don't see the economy get better, well, these are the folks who voted for President Trump, hoping for the economy to turn around in their mind. If they don't see it, then maybe even within the party, there could still be a change of heart.
The big argument for the Republicans is that this is a tax change that will benefit the middle class. Do the people surveyed actually believe that as well?
Yeah, the middle class is ranked lower on the groups that benefit than those others. But there again, I think we're still in kind of a wait and see period to some extent. And look, there's still a lot of people who say we don't feel like we fully understand all the implications of this. And, you know, people don't always admit that in polls. So that's a flag where you want to look and say, okay, here's the initial reaction, but it's not necessarily what's going to play out over time when they talk about that. And I think, yeah, to your point, if over time they think the economy has gotten better for them, then they go back and they reassess. We've even seen that with the ACA.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting in the poll, too, that both Republicans and Democrats did not think that the ACA and any changes to the ACA should be connected to the tax plan. We know the Senate version it has a component that would remove the individual mandate. And it didn't matter party lines. They want to see the ACA intact.
Yeah, well,
at least they don't want to connect it to any tax legislation.
That's exactly right. They do feel that it is separate. Republicans included thought that. You know, we often find that when people see a bill, to the point of trying to understand it, they like it to be simpler. So they say, okay, well, it does this and I can evaluate it. But on the point about the ACA, right, it's grown in popularity over time. And so we've seen over time that they want to retain large portions of it. That's part of the reason. And then again, back to this idea of the tax cut, over time, opinions can change as the policy gets out there and as people start to evaluate its benefits. Right. So that's sort of a longer-term lesson. Take the initial reaction, but then pull back and say, well, that doesn't mean it will stay this way forever.
One of the things, Anthony, that all independent groups that have taken a look at this bill say is that it will increase, it will add to the deficit, something that Republicans generally have been opposed to but seem to be on board with as it stands right now. That may change, though. How do Americans think it will impact the deficit?
They're by and large thinking that it will increase the deficit. Then you ask the question, is that okay? Now, Republicans are the most likely to say it's acceptable to increase the deficit in order to get this tax cut, ostensibly in order to sort of, jumpstart the economy or make the economy better. But you're right. We have seen a difference now in what Republicans say is a priority and what is, the implications of cutting taxes. So you see that they would like to see the deficit go down in principle. But they're willing to make some trade-offs now on the deficit that they weren't necessarily willing to make when the Democrats were in control.
I mean, the Republicans are supposed to be the fiscally conservative bunch. That's really surprising.
And many of them still are. I mean, we can't, just because something falls close over a majority number doesn't mean all.
Right.
So there still are a substantial number of them. And actually, I think that's why now you see in Washington, there's still some jockeying with different folks in the House, different parts of the Republican Party, because there are still a lot of legislators who are concerned about the deficit because they know they have to go back and face those constituents who are still concerned about it. It has not just simply flipped because they're in power. They make the short-term trade-off, but in principle, those ideas still remain, and they probably do have to be careful not to say, well, I went out and increased the deficit that we've been telling you for so long, for so many years, is such a problem.
Right.
Fascinating numbers, my friend. Thank you as always. We appreciate it.